How stupid can you get? Robots.txt directives are not technological measures. Yeah, robots.txt. We put a text file here saying pretty please. It's not an access control, it's a wish. This is silly. This has got to be the stupidest argument ever. How is this case going anywhere? How is this not being stopped in its tracks by a judge saying you're so stupid? They've got nothing here. As they lose claim after claim after claim, they get more and more desperate, and their arguments become more and more stupid. I swear, these AI cases just get dumber and dumber. Here's one from a few weeks ago that we finally got the document for. This is in the Ziff Davis case against OpenAI. It's part of the pile-on of cases they've been doing in the SDNY. But they haven't been very good about releasing the documents from it. Well, here's one I was searching around. I was having Grok look around and find, has anyone shared any of this? Because it is so dumb, I just had to share it with you. Grok found this one on ChatGPT is Eating the World. That's the name of the website. But Ziff Davis came up with their second amended complaint, which we still don't have. But here is OpenAI's response, their memorandum of law in opposition to plaintiff's motion for leave to file second amended complaint. So they want to file a second amended complaint. And they gave a draft of the complaint. And OpenAI is going to say, nah, this is dumb. Why? Well, it's still DMCA 1201, isn't it? Because that's like the latest goalpost. When they keep losing, they have to come up with other things. Like they came up with the CMI thing and they lost on that. Now they're doing the DMCA. And we've talked before about how they're doing the access control. And they tried to say an access control was something like hitting the F12 key and copying a link. Ooh, YouTube didn't give you that link directly. You have to hit the F12 key and go get the link. Okay, they made it slightly more annoying to do so. But that doesn't make it an access control. And remember, the point is the difference between an access control and a copy control. You can bypass a copy control for reasons of fair use. You cannot do that with an access control. And so, like they've been doing for the last 25 years, they've been trying to say that everything is an access control, and look at what they're doing. As the court recognized at the November 13 hearing, Ziff Davis's robots.txt directives are not technological measures that effectively control access to copyrighted works under Section 1201. Yeah, robots.txt. Everyone who's ever worked with websites knows what this is. This is a text file that's at the root of almost every website. Most websites use this. And it'll say, hey, Google and all you other crawlers that are trying to index this for search engines, don't look in here. Don't index this part. And these are public, so if I were to go to this website, chatgptiseatingtheworld.com, and I just put in robots.txt on the end of it, I can see their robots.txt. It's got a couple of links to a sitemap. It sets up a user agent for star. That's all of them. All user agents are allowed. But disallow WP admin, except for allow WP admin /admin ajax.php. This is public. It's perfectly okay that I did this. It's just saying to the bots out there, this is what I want you to look at and this is what I don't. Look at the whole website except for WP admin, because that's the WordPress admin directory, except for some reason, this admin ajax.php. So what you can do, what you cannot do, things like that. But as they point out, robots.txt directives are merely precatory statements that express a preference or request. It's just a text file that says pretty please. And they reference the November 13th hearing where Judge Sidney Stein said in court, it seems to me that Mr. Gratz is right that there's nothing in here that controls access. It still seems to be the term he used, precatory. So it's not an access control, it's a wish. Robots.txt files do nothing by their own operation to restrict access. They're just a text file. They just sit there. You don't even have to look at them. A user can access Ziff Davis's copyrighted content, whether with a crawler or otherwise, regardless of what Ziff Davis's robots.txt directives say. In other words, Ziff Davis's robots.txt files express preferences, not permissions. That's all robots.txt files. A robots.txt file is a notice, akin to a sign saying, please use the revolving door or don't step on the lawn. And a voluntary decision to heed that notice does not turn the sign into a locked gate. Like we were seeing with the YouTube DL thing, how they were trying to turn a speed bump into a gate. Here they're trying to turn a keep off the grass sign into a fence. This is silly. This has got to be the stupidest argument ever. How is this case going anywhere? Well, this is a relatively recent one. It started just in April, but still, they've got nothing here. That might be the reason, though, for all these cases in the SDNY, so they can throw a bunch of crap against the wall and see what sticks. And then whatever sticks, we've seen them, they immediately turn around and copy it to all the others. First, Ziff Davis does not and cannot allege that robots.txt directives are technological measures that effectively control access under Section 1201 of the DMCA. Second, Ziff Davis fails to allege that OpenAI circumvented any such measures. And while supporting their first one, they say Ziff Davis's own allegations confirm that a robots.txt file does not effectively control access to anything. That alone is fatal to Ziff Davis's claim, rendering its proposed amendment futile. You're going to stick in this amendment to say, hey, robots.txt files violate the DMCA because they're access controls. No! That's silly. That's stupid. The law is clear that whereas here an alleged technological measure merely expresses a preference that can be ignored, it does not qualify as a technological measure that effectively controls access for purposes of a Section 1201 claim. Access controls are things that stop you even when you try to just ignore them. Imagine you're this master hacker, and you want to get into a system. The first thing you hit is a firewall. Well, you skillfully bash your way through the firewall. Then you get to the system and it's password protected, and you cleverly crack the password and get in there. Then there's a text file. The text file is readmeplease.txt, and inside the text file it says, pretty please do not hack into this computer. Now, what are the access control measures? Is the firewall an access control measure? Yeah, it is. Is the password an access control measure? Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't matter if it's password 123 with an @ sign instead of the A or something simple like that. Doesn't have to be effective. It just has to be there. That text file that says pretty please? How is that in any way an access control? It's not. You don't have to look at it. You might not even realize it's there. Ziff Davis admits that the directives in its robots.txt files can be ignored. That is because web crawlers have to be configured to automatically access and read robots.txt files. In other words, crawler operators must affirmatively tell the bot to access, read, and interpret robots.txt instructions. But if the crawler operator does not do this, its crawler can freely access a website without reading a robots.txt file at all. But suppose you've got a part of the site that's not publicly available that you have to go through a password to get to, you're not going to be able to scrape that. Without somehow getting hold of a password, you're not going to be able to go through that and scrape that at all. That is an access control measure. This is not. Ziff Davis attempts to avoid that reality by alleging that because reputable companies that operate crawlers configure their bots to automatically access and read the robots.txt code, Ziff Davis's robots.txt code effectively controls access to its websites. Rather than support its position, however, Ziff Davis's allegation confirms that its robots.txt files do not qualify as a technological measure that effectively controls access within the meaning of Section 1201. Because reputable companies do that. Just like reputable delivery people don't step on the grass. But some of them might. That doesn't turn that sign into a fence. Which is their point here on the next page. A sign saying keep off the grass only keeps you off the grass if you decide to read and follow the sign. The same is true of robots.txt. That a delivery person has been instructed to follow keep off the grass signs and faithfully executes the instruction does not mean those signs are anything but precatory. Ziff Davis tries to elide that concession by arguing in its motion to amend that processing and complying with robots.txt directives represent default web crawler behavior, not optional conduct. That is not, however, what the proposed Second Amendment complaint says. Be nice if we could read that, but anyway. Presumably because Ziff Davis knows that it is not universally true for all bots and thus cannot be alleged in compliance with Rule 11. And in a footnote they say, indeed, Plaintiff Mashable Inc., a Ziff Davis publication, has described robots.txt as a suggestion rather than a hard rule. In other words, it is only once a company chooses to configure a bot to automatically access and read the robots.txt code that the bot follows robots.txt instructions. But that occurs only so long as that company chooses to continue that configuration, which the company can change at any time. Those allegations confirm that Ziff Davis's robots.txt files do not control access at all. Whether a bot has access turns not on the alleged access control measure, the robots.txt files, but what on third-party users choose to do or not do. It really feels like they're trying to explain this to kindergarteners. Ziff Davis also has not, after 3 attempts, alleged that OpenAI engaged in an act of circumvention, a separate and independent requirement to state a claim under Section 1201A1. In other words, even if Ziff Davis had successfully alleged an access control, which it has not, its Section 1201 claim would still fail because it has not successfully alleged circumvention, which it clearly cannot. They're not even trying to claim that they circumvented anything. They're just saying they didn't read a text file. That's all they're saying. We put a text file here saying pretty please. And that's the whole of it. As the statutory examples make clear, the relevant action that constitutes circumvention must be something akin to breaking and entering or hacking into computer systems. That makes sense because the DMCA targets the circumvention of digital walls guarding copyrighted material. Listen to this next part, it's important. A cause of action under the DMCA does not accrue upon unauthorized and injurious access alone. All the propagandists on X will tell you that. All the anti-AI people will screech that mere unauthorized access stops everything else. No. Wrong. Courts have accordingly held that merely breaching contractual restrictions or using a tool in an unauthorized manner is insufficient to show circumvention. Yeah, I mean, how is this going anywhere? How is this not being stopped in its tracks by a judge saying, "You're so stupid"? OpenAI's conduct did not and could not frustrate the operation of a technical measure itself. Indeed, Ziff Davis's argument would lead to the absurd result that a measure could be circumvented simply by a user changing their mind, not by a website changing their allegedly protective measures. A delivery person does not actively circumvent a keep off the grass sign when, after initially keeping off the grass, he reconsiders and takes a shortcut across the lawn. Finally, in the specific context of robots.txt, Ziff Davis's argument implies that a crawler operator who initially configured their crawlers to follow robots.txt instructions and later altered the configuration would be subject to liability, while one who never set their crawlers to follow robots.txt directives would not. That result would be absurd and is almost certainly not what Congress intended. A measure that is subject to the whim of users cannot effectively control access, and alleged changes of heart by users cannot constitute circumventions. As they lose claim after claim after claim, they get more and more desperate, and their arguments become more and more stupid. To the point where they're saying that a technological access control measure is a text file saying please don't. How stupid can you get? Thank you so very much for watching. Comments for the comment god, shares for the share throne. Please hit like, subscribe, and the bell. And of course, donate.bogosity.tv keeps me doing this through the cold and the rain and everything else that's been happening here lately. With me trying to keep my voice from failing during all of this, that has not been easy. But thank you so much for watching. Until next time, stay strong and be free.